All right, so welcome again. I'm Annabelle Munson, and welcome to the Universal Business Aviation Ops Update webinar and Meetup. I'm your host and moderator for today's session. Today, we're going to be diving into an ops update with a focus on summer ops planning into the very in-demand Mediterranean region, the continued and growing business traffic into Europe and Asia Pacific, and pro tips for all types of trips for both Part 91 and 135 flight departments, plus some in-depth regulatory best practices to catch up on as well, and of course, an overview of the high-traffic major international events to watch out for this season. Scope, like I mentioned, we do cover a lot and try to keep things moving with the live summary of this operational news, but there are a couple of additional ways that you can stay abreast of all this info. First, if you haven't already, subscribe to our Operational Insight blog. Lewis is going to drop that in the chat. That link, that's a great way to stay up to date with more in-depth articles. Or now you can also get detailed destination insights and essential pre-tip planning information on demand when you need it via Universal's Feasibility IQ app. That's your one-stop resource for mission planning intelligence, accessible whenever you need it. And actually, I noticed this as I was thinking about it earlier with the team. The 30-day free trial is still active, and honestly, now would be a great time to take advantage of that if you're on the fence, because frankly speaking, you've got a lot coming up for the summer, so it might be a good time to test it out, see if it's a tool that works for you. I think Lewis is going to drop those links into the chat. All right, let's get started with an overview. Like I touched on earlier, we're covering a lot of territory today to help you get ready for this season's busy operational outlook. We'll do a sweep first across two major world regions that are very high in demand, Europe and Asia Pacific. We're going to hit the high points on what's new and notable. As promised, everything Mediterranean peak season is on the agenda. It's hot right now for sure. And from what my guests are telling me, it's going to be an extended as well as very busy summer. Business operations are back, so we can't let leisure travel take all the credit, and stronger than ever, by the way, for many places. We have insights on travel into Europe's popular business destinations, as well as those key Asia Pacific locations, with tips for both Part 91 and 135 operations. We're going to feature an all-hands regulatory roundup for you as well, everything you need to stay operationally flexible, US CBP updates, Europe and Mexico news. And of course, we're going to definitely spend some time on your questions, so keep those rolling in the chat. Also, if I could get a little help from you on something new I'm testing out, and I definitely appreciate your feedback on this post-session. I've asked our Feasibility IQ product expert, Justin Murray, to play a little bit of Wizard of Oz in the background today, showcasing some of the content that's available in Feasibility IQ in line with what the speakers are talking about. I got some feedback that there are a lot of new users for Feasibility IQ that are tuning into the webinars, and they've been asking, so how can I see some of this in the app? Well, I can't unfortunately dedicate all the time to, hey, go look here in the app for this great intel. What I can do is I'm testing out a way to show some of this to you as we go along. So those of you who are in the app using it right now, you can be like, oh, I absolutely see what they're talking about. We are going to do some screen shout outs for city and country event data, location trends, parking info, all things that our speakers are going to cover. So most importantly, on your end, whether you're a user or not, let me know if you find this useful. Because I can always do more of it. And if not, we can find other ways. And I do plan to do a deeper dive on Feasibility IQ, a power session with our experts, Monica and Justin, later on this summer. So that way you can get deeper insights for those who are already in the app. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let me introduce our panel for today. And I'm really excited about this first guest. A warm welcome back to Christine Van Vacas, our Senior Account Manager for Charter Services. Christine actually helped build our Ops Update webinar program during the pandemic, and we're thrilled to have her back with us for today's program. I hope it's not going to be the last time. Christine's going to take us on a tour of Europe, all those insights she's going to offer, and hopefully very actionable intel. Joining us again is Adriel Wilson, Account Manager for Charter Services. He's got deep op experience with his very recent days in trip support as a mission advisor. He's going to be covering Asia Pacific. Next up, Juan Munoz, also a frequent contributor, supervisor for Global Regulatory Services team here at Universal. He's returning to the Ops Update stage to be our secret weapon for everything regulatory. For that deeper dive into the Mediterranean peak season that I mentioned, we're welcoming 4 guests from both Universal Aviation and our air-to-ground VIP services representatives. First, Dimitra Kirikopoulou with Universal Aviation Greece. So good to have her back. Healy Laughlin with air-to-ground VIP services, her first time with us. Andrea Sbaraccia with Universal Aviation Italy. And Gonzalo Barona Jr. with Universal Aviation Spain. So lots of names you probably recognize from our Mediterranean. So again, their insights are going to be super welcome. All right, as we turn the page and get ready to focus on summer peak season, I have a question for you. What does your flight department, what are your plans for this summer season? And really specifically, what I want to do is talk about what that looks like compared to 2022. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to launch this poll. If you could do me a favor and take a quick look. Oh, hang on a second. My poll just decided to fail. Let's try that again. No, I've never had that happen. Okay, there it is. Tell me you're seeing it. Yes. Okay, awesome. Ooh, that was scary. All right, so pretty simply, compared to 2022, what are you thinking about for 2023, this summer peak season? I'm having the hardest time saying summer peak season today, by the way, if you haven't noticed. I bring this up because we track, of course, a lot of data here at Universal. Well, some of the trip tracking indicators out there in the market are generally pointing to a slight softening when it comes to trip volumes worldwide right now for private aviation. But I can tell you, based on the data that we have internally for Universal, that we're seeing a very robust outlook for international trips, especially with, I should say, our Part 91 operators in particular are really looking further and further ahead for their trip planning. We have booked trips in August and into the fall. So that's why I thought this might be an interesting take on your side. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. I think we've had most of our attendees answer, and I'm going to share the results with you. All right, good. Can someone give me a heads up that yes, you can see it on the screen? Excellent. All right, so some of you are tracking about the same. That's definitely the biggest answer, or the highest percentage of answer. And then the next, looking at a slight increase. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. That just gives us a little bit, gets our heads in the right space. And from here, we get to the exciting part. I get to bring Christine on stage. Welcome, Christine. So cool to have you back. All right, get us started. What's the top level view on what to expect for the Mediterranean, European ops, and upcoming high traffic events?
All right, so first things first, the med season is obviously upon us. And with that, what we're seeing is that it's going to be as busy, if not busier than last year, but we're also seeing an extended peak season going from May through October. So this season is obviously going to be kicked off by some events, some high traffic events. The first one being the Cannes Film Festival from May 16th through the 27th, the Monaco Grand Prix in Cannes on May 26th, the UEFA Champions League final in Istanbul on June 10th, and last but not least, we have the Paris Air Show at Le Bourget from June 19th through the 25th. So these high traffic events, obviously they bring in a lot of GA traffic. So if you do have operators that are looking to go to these regions, or these areas rather, and they haven't submitted their request yet, it's imperative to do so. We are dealing with a finite number of services. Also consider that when you do get services confirmed, the big thing here is do not make revisions if at all possible. The reason we say that is once things are confirmed, if you make any changes, what they'll do is they'll cancel what you have and put you at the bottom of the queue to re-request things. A great example of this is Nice. So we want to avoid that at all costs. As far as EU in general, things to consider. The theme here this year is to be strategic. And by that, I mean you want to get the best possible solutions ahead of the trip. Though you may want parking at certain high traffic locations, it's best to look at alternative options to secure what you want and you need for the aircraft, and then be able to secure the whole trip as a whole ahead of time rather than leaving it until the last minute. As far as charter operators, a few things to note here. Obviously, regulations in the EU are restrictive. You want to make sure that things are taken are arranged in advance. So if you don't have your UK or your EASA TCO in place or updated with the aircraft, you want to go ahead and do so. These civil aviations will not process requests until those are in place. Once they are in place, consider the lead times for civil aviations. They are restrictive in how far in advance that you must request it, such as the UK and Germany that require a minimum of 48 working hours in order to review those. As far as blanket permits, Italy and Greece do offer that. That gives you that additional or shorter lead time for short notice requests for charter operators. It does take some time to go ahead and get that arranged. So if you don't have it, get those requests in. And the other thing to consider for charter operators, things are becoming much more restrictive. We are seeing trends from civil aviations just making things a bit less manageable. And what I mean by that, France, for example, the civil aviation director, compared to last year, what they did is they reenacted the cabotage restrictions. So in the past, you would be able to do multiple stops, but that is likely not going to be an option now. You can request it, but you won't hear until the day prior, and it'll likely be a denial. So you don't want to put that trip in jeopardy. Then we are seeing fuel shortages. It was an issue last year. We're expecting it to continue this year. We've already kind of seen signs of that. In addition to that, we are seeing strikes in recent weeks. We saw them in Germany and France. Those will compact those fuel shortages. So we want to make sure that you guys have all the options to try to make your arrangements. The biggest thing here is any and all fuel cards, just get them. You want to make sure that you have any and all options available to you on the ground. If you can tanker, go ahead and do so because some of them are short notice. If you can land and there is fuel available on arrival, I know a lot of operators don't want to do that if the aircraft is going to be on the ground for a bit, but this way you can secure that fuel on arrival and avoid those delays. And also, if you can't tanker and it's a short notice fuel situation, just know that you may have to add a stop after that location. So that may increase the cost for charter operators. And also you want to set those expectations for the passengers. And then the last thing is the supply chain shortages. Across the spectrum, we've seen it. It's still an issue from airport authorities to ground handlers, caterers, and such. It's going to take longer to arrange things, and we are seeing slower movements on the ground. So allow that additional time, such as catering. You want at least 48 working hours if you can. And also for some of these high traffic locations, we can arrange additional supervision for you to ensure that you get that VIP service, but additional time is needed in order to secure that.
Got it. All right, Christine, you weren't joking. Lots of great info to share and important ones nonetheless. Now, what's your advice for those most in-demand locations and those really high traffic destinations in particular within Europe?
So I'm sure that by this point, we all know who or what those destinations are, and we have subject matter experts that are going to be speaking to that shortly. The big thing to consider here is parking obviously is going to be the big issue. We have operators that have already submitted their trips through October to try to secure those options. Being that parking is going to be the biggest headache, what we need to consider is what we can do. A lot of these high traffic destinations will not review parking requests until 14 days prior. We see that both in Italy and Greece. So in order to avoid those short notice issues where you cannot secure your services, if parking is not approved, then you're behind the curveball. So what's best is to just consider that high traffic destination as a drop and go, get those passengers in, and just repo further to the north outside of what I would call that peak travel zone. That way you can secure the parking, the hotels, and everything else you need for the crew and the aircraft. And then the last thing here is we've seen a lot of locations that we relied on in the past for extended parking, and those may not be an option this year. And I know that our subject matter experts will speak a bit more to that.
Exactly. Definitely. Thank you so much, Christine. I'm so excited. Okay, I think you can all agree. We're happy to have her back and we're going to make her stay. Yes. Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm going to have my next poll is going to be, should Christine do this every month? Yes, I think that's the answer. So so good to have you back. Thank you for sharing your insights and all of that. And I'd really appreciate, and one thing I want to call out for sure is that strategic angle is going to be across everyone's report today. Be thinking strategically and make sure you're bringing that to the table within your flight department, with your crew and planning, with your scheduling department, as well as with those passengers, setting expectations as to what's going to be feasible, plausible, and executable so that you are in the best position possible. So thank you, Christine. All right. So from here, I'm going to, and Christine's going to stay with us for questions, don't you worry. From here, though, we're going to go to Adriel. Very good to have you back with us again. He's going to take us through the latest on Asia Pacific. The region is seeing more and more traffic now, of course, and business trip demand seems to be a big part of that, along with the return of some world events into the region as well. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. I'll start off by kicking off with the G7 summit that'll be taking place in Hiroshima, Japan from May 19th to the 21st. One thing that we are seeing is APAC region has experienced, a prolonged COVID shutdown, which required many of the major airports to reduce their staffing, as well as hold off on airport maintenance and construction. And now with COVID restrictions lifted in the region is faced with the challenge of meeting the current and upcoming peak GA demands, while also dealing with supply chain issues, the airport maintenance, and a renewed, but sometimes less experienced staff than they had pre-COVID. So these challenges have resulted in reduced airport GA operation hours and GA bans altogether for some of these places, as well as heavy congestion across the region as a result of that.
Got it. And can you take us through some of those most in-demand destinations?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, everybody is looking at China. So some updates for them, COVID updates, PCR tests no longer required. They are still requiring an antigen test within 48 hours before your departure to China, but that can also be a self-done at home test. They accept that as well. The other exciting news about visas is the Chinese visas that were issued prior to March 28th, 2020, they're again valid. So that's pretty exciting for people. For Beijing's ZBAD airport, it's now open to domestic GA traffic. There's some time restrictions from 0700 to 0900 local for GA, but I just want to emphasize that is domestic traffic. They still don't have customs immigration available at the airport yet. Also, Shanghai's ZSPD, airport is closed to all GA traffic from March 26th to June 3rd due to major airport construction. So the ZSSS airport is the only GA option, but they're also seeing an increase in commercial traffic overflow that was going to ZSPD. So expect parking shortages for Shanghai for the time period from March 26th to June 3rd, at least. And then likewise, Guangzhou's ZGGG airport is closed to all GA traffic from the 24th of April to the 20th of May due to major airport construction. And then Vietnam, little update, Vietnam had some shifting in their CA leadership during COVID. And as a result, they've become a little bit stricter on their cabotage enforcement, with not allowing any additional passengers to board domestic legs, and that's for private or charter flights. Additionally, Vietnam has begun strictly enforcing permit lead times. Previously, there was a little bit of leeway and flexibility, but they're pretty firm about this right now. CA just issued an update. And then insufficient lead times are going to result in not obtaining your permanent time. And those lead times are going to be 5 business days for charter landing, 3 business days for private. And then for the Philippines, one thing we're seeing is the Philippines also experienced congestion and staffing shortages. Manila's RPLL airport has a GA ban from 1000 local to 1900 local. And then just as a reminder for all the charter operators that are trying to get to Hong Kong and Singapore, I just wanted to give you an update. Just a reminder for charter operators who flights to Hong Kong, please be aware that Hong Kong has very specific aircraft insurance policy requirements. So check with your charter team and your insurance broker now if you think you may have a charter operation in and out of Hong Kong. And then for Singapore, charter flights into Singapore require a foreign operator permit as well as an air transport permit. But getting the foreign operator permit can be cumbersome and can take a couple of months or more to get. So just things to be cognizant of as you start planning trips and have charters pop up from brokers to the Far East.
Got it. All right. Thanks for that. Adriel, any pro tips to share for smoothing operations into the region overall?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Christine said applies obviously to the APAC region as well. I think you can see the trend for GA restrictions and airport closures has already started happening. We're not even hitting peak season yet. And I know on every webinar, I always say advanced planning is paramount. It gives you more time to mitigate bans, closures, NOTAMs that pop up, the scheduling conflicts, things that could potentially disrupt your flight schedules. But additionally, one thing I would recommend is it's been a few years since a lot of these locations have experienced heavy GA demand. So utilize vendors that are vetted and well-trained post-COVID. Obviously, I recommend using Universal's network, but if there are locations and vendors that you've used in the past outside of our network, then I recommend revetting and reassessing those vendors' capabilities of handling your operations.
Right. In other words, just don't take it for granted. Just because it worked in the past, it does not mean that it's going to be in the same current state. I know we heard that from our team in China directly when we talked with them a few months ago, as things were initially opening within their region, and they saw it across Asia as well. So very good reminders there. Thanks so much, Adriel, for the Asia Pacific review. You're going to be with us for questions, so I will let you go for now. But meantime, I get to bring Juan up on stage. Welcome, Juan.
Thank you.
Hey, all right. So all things regulatory. We're here to help. You're here to help us steer in the right direction. It's our frequent contributor, Juan Munoz. Welcome and glad to see you. Get us started. Let's start with Mexico to change things up a bit. I understand there are some rules in place regarding blanket and annual permits that operators need to be fully aware of before operating into Mexico. Can you tell us more?
Sure. So as far as charter operations, AFEX recently confirmed that charter operators are only allowed 3 one-time permits before a blanket has to be applied for. So this is for the entire operation and not on an annual basis. It's 3 one-shot permits per charter operator. So if you are looking to make more than that many trips to Mexico, really recommend starting to apply for that blanket permit. We have specifically seen this enforcement in Cancun, Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara, and Cozumel. So if those are your destinations, absolutely recommend getting those started. They do take about 90 days, minimum of 90 days to process. So it is a quite lengthy process. And keep in mind that in order to apply for the blanket permit, your aircraft must meet certain equipment requirements. And your aircraft, those equipments are that aircraft have to have an FDR, CVR, TCAS-2, a terrain awareness warning system, and a transponder. So only those aircraft that meet those 6 equipment requirements would be able to be on the blanket permit. You can still do one-time permits if your aircraft don't qualify for the equipment that is required. But keep in mind, if you do those one-time permits, then you're back in that 3 one-time limit. Again, that's for charter operators. For private operators, the annual permits or the multiple entry permits are still being issued. However, there has been a change in process. Before we were able to obtain them through AFAC, which was a whole lot better. But now they actually have to be done on the first entry of that aircraft into Mexico. The bad thing about this, I would say, is that now the local authorities are issuing these annual permits with a list of crew members, and it's only going to be the crew members that are present with that arrival. So if you have your 2 crew, let's say, that arrive with that aircraft, it's only valid when those 2 crew are on board that aircraft. If you have a change in crew for a later flight, that annual permit will no longer be valid. You would either have to get a new annual permit or do a one-time permit.
Got it. Okay, definitely a lot to consider there with Mexico. Thanks for that. So let's move up north to the U.S. Always popular CBP related updates. What are your thoughts there, tips and suggestions, especially things that can keep our operators as flexible as possible?
Sure. So first I'll start with departure APIS changes for private operators. In the past, an estimated time of departure would not constitute an APIS transmission. But now if your departure time exceeds plus or minus 60 minutes from your initial submission for APIS, you have to refile your APIS. According to CBP headquarters as well, after you submit that new APIS, you have to give your departing port a call to let them know of the new APIS transmission. Therefore, they can cancel the previous transmission that is no longer valid. As far as overflight exemption renewals, those have been pretty standard over the past few years. However, CBP is cracking down a little bit, especially on charter operators. In order to renew your border overflight exemption, they're making sure that a charter operator has their customs bond in place, and all their passenger fees have been paid in the past. If as a charter operator, you don't have your customs bond or you have outstanding passenger fees, your overflight will not be renewed. CBP will reach out to you at that moment to let you know. RSP, the Reimbursable Services Program, and what you're seeing on the screen right now is the LAX, what LAX looks like on our trip feasibility IQ. RSP, we are now up to 57 ports. As of this morning, it was 57. We just added Fort Myers and Moffett Field in California. So now we're up to 57. So the RSP program allows an operator to arrive in one of these approved ports after hours. The overtime is paid directly to the port, and you don't have to rely on state issued or government issued overtime. You are able to provide that overtime pay for those after hours clearance. Visa waiver program, nothing to change here, but if you don't have it and you fly internationally, we recommend it 100%. It is one of those programs that you might not need now, but it has 7-year validity. So it's a very good recommendation for all international operations to obtain. Pre-clearance, we're seeing a lot of influx come in recently about pre-clearance questions. Keep in mind that for business aviation, pre-clearance is only available in Shannon, Ireland and Aruba. It is not available for business aviation in Canada, Dubai, Bermuda, Bahamas, etc. It is only in Shannon, Ireland and Aruba. And lastly, for the US, I have Secure Flight. What's the purpose of Secure Flight is to screen individuals before they access airport sterile areas or board an aircraft. It's intended for travelers of covered domestic and international flights within the US, from the US and to the US. This is now being extended to general aviation. Operators that are part of a TSA security program, 12.5 and private charter operators are required to comply. Operators should contact their TSA principal security officer for more information on this.
Got it. Lots there too. All right, let's turn to Europe. We're just going all over the world. Go ahead, Juan.
All right, as far as Europe is concerned, for EU LISA, that implementation has delayed now until 2024. It was late 2023, and as of last month, they have decided to push back until 2024. What month is still up in the air, but it will be sometime during next year. The registration process is still open. They had paused it for a while, but they have opened it. So if you have not registered for EU LISA, our recommendation is to do it as soon as possible. For the UK, they are implemented the Electronic Travel Authorization, the ETA. Is going to be a new requirement for people who don't need a visa to come into the UK. It gives them permission to travel to the UK, and it's electronically linked to their passport. Some dates to keep in mind: October 15th, they will begin with nationals of Qatar on requiring this ETA. October 22nd are nationals of Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. They're going to require that ETA as of those dates. For US citizens and other nationalities, it's going to be sometime in 2024. They're estimating that by the third quarter of 2024, any visa exempt passengers going into the UK will require this ETA. Christine touched on the TCOs. Keep in mind that a EU TCO is not valid for the UK. If you have not applied for your UK TCO, do so now. The process does take about 3 to 4 weeks to obtain, so it is a little bit of a lengthy process. You are not able to operate as a charter flight into the UK if you do not have your TCO in place. And as far as emissions, we finally just closed down the emissions reporting 2022 year. May 1st was the closing of that year. Very successful. We saw numbers go back to 2019 normal numbers. So that is a very good sign. Voluntary carbon offset, it's still a hot topic. So if you have any questions on voluntary offsetting, let us know and we can help you with that.
I think the real question here, Juan, is when does our Global Regulatory Services team sleep? I have no idea. All right, finally, let's wrap up with APIS internationally. What's going on there?
So we have received notice that there are new requirements for APIS in Luxembourg, Poland, Turkey, and Bermuda. We are already working on implementation of these processes here in Universal. So we will be able to take care of those. Currently, the FBOs and handlers in those locations are submitting the APIS. That's really it for APIS, but I do want to remind everyone that we do have an Essentials in Scheduling and Dispatch for Business Aviation course. That's our 2-day course, May 17th and 19th, where we'll discuss these topics along with a whole lot more. So if you haven't signed up for it now.
Oh, yeah, I totally forgot to mention that. That is true. And I know we've gotten a lot of interest. So thank you for that, Juan. And yeah, you could definitely look for that in our update email as well. And I think if Louis gets a chance, he'll drop the link in for anyone who wants more info, or send us an email. We'll get you in touch with Juan. He will be happy to tell you more. All right, Juan's going to be here for questions if you need him. Thank you again, Juan. And from here, I get to bring on our Mediterranean team. So we're going to get started with Dimitra from Greece. Welcome. So happy to see her. And yes, I have to say it, sadly, another year has passed and I am not doing this wonderful Mediterranean deep dive update from the Mediterranean. Sadly, yet again, somehow my travel budget didn't accommodate. I will try again for 2024. Right, but that said, let's get started with her update. Pleasure to see you. Thanks for joining. So as I mentioned, it's been about a year. Here we are with summer 2023 starting. What is new with Universal Aviation Greece since last summer?
Hello, Annabelle. Hello, everybody. It is so nice to be back with you all here again. So as far as Greece is concerned, no big announcements or dramatic changes this year. After a remarkably busy and challenging summer 2022, our focus was to reinforce our team and recruit additional staff, prepare ourselves to provide a smooth and hopefully seamless service to our clients for what seems to be yet another very, very busy summer in the Mediterranean.
All right. And with that in mind, can you tell us of any big events, major events in your region that may cause more traffic than normal?
Athens will be hosting the 2023 UEFA Super Cup on August 16th. We don't know yet which teams will compete in this game, but we do expect lots of traffic, which will create significant congestion at Athens Airport. On a positive note, though, mid-August is the time that travelers are usually settled at their destinations in the islands, not Athens. So this additional traffic is not expected to heavily affect the usual seasonal traffic.
Got it. Good to know. All right. Well, here we go. No update on private aircraft operations into Greece over the summer months would be complete without a very big discussion on the realities of parking. Can you review the main parking guidelines and expected traffic situation you're planning for right now?
This is a kind of frustrating topic for me to discuss. So starting with Athens, the news are discouraging, I'm afraid. GA ramp space is significantly reduced since a large part of what used to be GA parking is now not serviceable anymore. And another part is turning into airline parking. There are currently some works in progress, creating some more space to accommodate part of what was taken away from us, but we still need a couple of months before this becomes available, and it's not going to replace the whole loss. Having said that, I would strongly advise all not to consider Athens for more than a drop-off or a pickup. Currently, the relevant NOTAM allows 24 hours parking, which I would expect to be further reduced going deeper into the summer season. About the rest of Greece, Mykonos and Santorini continue to have the same restrictions as the previous years, 40 minutes turnaround only. And then we have the usual suspects, Paros, Rhodes, Kalamata, Kefalonia, Corfu, that are also pretty congested, not having space to accommodate long stays.
Understood. All right. So that brings us to the discussion of alternate airports. I know this is a general overview since each person's needs are different, but can you give us an update?
Sure. So actually, the Russian-Ukrainian crisis has created an option for us. Thessaloniki has seen its commercial traffic slightly going down, so now can offer parking space for stays for up to a week. this is a good option. It's a big city. There are good hotel accommodation options. It's 24/7. It's an international airport. I would totally recommend it. Then we have the usual options, same as the last year. Kos, Mytilene, Kavala, Samos. Samos, unfortunately, this summer is not operating 24/7 anymore. And then for really long stays, we have Sitia, Ioannina, Alexandroupoli, Limnos, and Volos. These last airports have space to offer, but lack the nice facilities, operating hours, and hotels in comparison to the other ones. We would recommend those as the last options to the operators that have not managed to find something else. Or to operators that are looking to just leave the aircraft somewhere and move the crew away back home or wherever they're planning to. Parking fees are also very low at those last airports.
So on that note, along with aircraft parking, as you mentioned, hotels and lodging are a super important topic, hand in hand with it as well. What's your advice for crew looking for hotels during the high season?
As demand rises, also the rates follow, which makes accommodation a significant expense. Unless it's an exceptional offer, do not book hotels until you have obtained the parking permit confirmation. We have faced several issues in the past with crew members not having booked the parking and trying to refund the amount paid, and they didn't. If you're in doubt, you can call our operation, you can check with our team, you can see what are the chances before proceeding with a booking. An important note also on ground transfers. Some of the airports that are offered for repositioning are not very popular, which means that they have only taxis available for crew transfer. I know that a minivan is the ideal solution for a comfortable transfer, especially when crew members are on long trips, carrying lots of luggage with them. But unfortunately, sometimes it's inevitable to settle for something less than the optimum.
Exactly. Any notes on a related vein for passenger hotel booking?
Usually passengers have made their own arrangements far in advance, but anyhow, in case that you need assistance, you're looking for transfer or whatever, don't wait till last minute to land and submit the request. Give us a call, send us a text, email us, whatever is working better for you, at least prior to boarding the aircraft. So we have the time to make all the necessary arrangements and avoid waiting times and causing inconvenience to your passengers.
Understood. All right. And then your final takeaways, Dimitra, any additional advice?
The usual, plan ahead. And also feel free to contact our operation for whatever you may need. We have an experienced team. We are ready to answer your question and provide the insight needed for a successful trip. And if I may, more as a request rather than a tip, please release what you hold and you are not planning to use. They say that one man's trash is another man's treasure, which totally applies when we're looking for parking or slots in the meds.
Oh, goodness. Yes, I think that's very well said. One man's trash when it comes to parking is another man's treasure. Yes, release those slots if you don't plan to use them. Great, great advice and much appreciated by the whole community, I am sure. So thank you, Dimitra. Best of luck for this summer season. All righty. So from here, I'd love to get an update on France. Welcome, Keely. And so Keely is a member of our air-to-ground VIP services team, and she is, I know, unfortunately not based in France, but she did work very closely with our team members there, Isabel and Jacques in particular, to collect this update. So she's here to provide that in person for you. She's also a regular webinar audience member, so it's really neat to have her on camera with me. So Keely, let's get started. Thanks for collecting the news from Isabel and Jacques. I know they'd love to join, but they're too busy for obvious reasons because spring is high already in France. So based on what your team is seeing at this early stage in the summer season, what locations are most in demand?
Hi, Annabelle. It's good to be here. In the south of France, we anticipate the busiest and most in-demand airports to be Nice, Toulon, Marseille, and Avion.
Excellent. All right. Can you give suggestions regarding everyone's favorite topic, aircraft parking? What areas are going to be most congested and what are some alternates?
Absolutely. A few things to keep in mind. Parking in Nice is not confirmed until 1 or 2 weeks prior to your arrival. So it's always a great idea to have a plan B. We recommend Genoa as a great reposition for parking, but as my colleagues in Italy will recommend, you should also have a plan C for your plan B. Cons is also an option. However, given the shorter runway, they cannot accept anything heavier than a G4. And to piggyback off what Christine said in our intro, we want to caution operators that when you apply for parking in Nice, that a tiny bit of change, even 10 minutes, will result in a cancellation and will put you at the bottom of the priority list.
Right. And I think I can speak for most of our team members here from what I've heard over the last couple of years doing the webinar. And this is a great time to remember it. Back to like making a small change might as well be a cancellation. Before you make any changes, contact your team, your trip support team in Universal or your Universal Aviation or Air-to-G or Air-to-Ground representative and discuss the problem first. Really the best piece of advice there is we know changes happen, but let's talk about it before you implement it. That way we can hopefully avoid, come up with the best solution, right? I think that's the best way of looking at it. We can collaborate on it together.
Absolutely.
All right. What are, Keely, the big events that will draw a lot of private aircraft traffic now between May and September for France? Anything our operators need to plan for?
We've got the Cannes Film Festival, May 16th through the 27th, the Monaco F1 race, May 25th through the 28th, the Le Mans 24-hour race, June 10th through 11th. And it's worth noting we will have additional supervisory reps at all of those locations should you need additional assistance. For Cannes and the Monaco F1, parking is already fully booked. In fact, there's 150 aircraft already on the waiting list. So if you are one of those lucky ones that do have a spot right now, we recommend planning not to take on any services during your quick turn. So no fuel, no lav, no catering, just in and out, because any delay in the services could impact your slot time.
Excellent. All right. And advice for crew when planning lodging, like you were just mentioning, ground services at the FBO as well as transportation?
So our tips for Nice is always to refuel on arrival or 1 day prior to departure. I'm sure a lot of people have seen some of the notices that TSS has been sending out. Unfortunately, the fuel situation in Nice has not changed over the last year. So we do encourage you to speak to your dispatchers and have them contact your mission advisors to discuss potential strikes, fuel shortages that may impact your trip.
All right, plan ahead, especially for fuel. No exceptions here. Thank you so much, Keely. I really appreciate the update. Send our thanks to Isa and to Jacques for those contributions. Hopefully we get to see them again in person soon. And next, I'd love to bring on Andrea with our Italy and Croatia teams. So good to see you. Andrea has been with us multiple times now, and I always look forward to seeing him. And yes, one day, I promise it will be in person. I absolutely promise I will make that happen. Okay, so since we last spoke about last summer season, what's new for, or if anything, or what are the good reminders for Italy 2023?
Hello, Annabelle and everyone. Glad to be here again. So compared to last year, despite the known difficulties for BSAV previously discussed by Christine, this year we'll still expect a traffic increase in Italy. Many airports have established a cap of maximum hours on the ground, no overnight possibility, and/or limitations for ferry flights. Therefore, no problems for quick turnarounds to drop off and pick up passengers, but it's going to be a challenge to find parking spots this year more than ever.
All right, of course, there's parking to consider. All right, let's talk about those events in Italy that could be important for operators to know about, since they, of course, add to the congestion. What airports will be affected as well?
There are so many known and hidden events planned that it would be impossible to list them all. I would mention in May, the Formula One Grand Prix of Imola, in June and July, Ferrari exclusive events, in Genoa, the Ocean Race, and the Google Camp in Sicily. In September, the Ryder Cup in Rome, and the Formula One Grand Prix in Milan area.
All right, see, again, so many opportunities for me to be there and report in person. Excellent, thank you. And so in general, for the busy summer season, you have a lot of locations and regions in Italy that see an increase in traffic and congestion. Can you be specific about what those most important locations are?
We foresee a generic increase of traffic from north to south of Italy, especially in known touristic and business locations. There will be some airports suffering from this increase, but this is where we get in the game and help to accomplish customers' mission.
All right, so make it specific to the mission. In other words, talk to your mission advisor, talk to your Universal Aviation representative. Okay, and then remind us of the parking situation at those busiest airports with some alternates.
Busy airports will be Rome, Naples, Venice, Pisa, Florence, Palermo, and Catania. All of these will suffer for congestion. Milan, both Linate and Malpensa, and Genoa are the best alternate, hassle-free options.
Great, good to know. And if we could switch over a little bit to Croatia, also a popular summer destination. What are some of the popular regions there, and touch base on the parking there as well?
Usually, the most popular destinations are on the coast: Dubrovnik, Split, Pula, Zadar, and Brac. Long stay parking solution in Croatia is Dubrovnik, or the well-known option Milan.
Excellent. All right. So as always, we're going to wrap up with your best advice for summer travel into your beautiful region.
Unless the destinations are Milan or Olbia in Sardinia, for all the other airports, let's start from the beginning to plan for repositioning legs, especially if the stay is scheduled to be for more than 2 overnights. Always ask for some advice, especially if the trip to Italy is planned during an important event. We are here to assist. Excellent.
All right. We'll trust the experts in that case, Andrea. So don't worry. The minute I make it over with my private aircraft, I'll be calling you. Wonderful. Thank you. And a pleasure to have you. And we'll have Andrea on as well for our Q&A at the end. And then lastly, I get to bring on Gonzalo, but I need to find him so I can put him on Spotlight. There he is. All right. Welcome, Gonzalo. You'll wrap up with our Spain overview. So good to see you. Also a frequent contributor. Bienvenidos. I know you have some great news. Let's start off with that. Some really good news to share about additional capabilities in those in-demand locations across Spain. Can you bring us up to date?
Well, hello, everyone. Yes, I am very excited about that. As many in the industry know, we were in partnership since 2019 with a well-known and established in the south of Spain local handling company called Andalucía Aviation Services. And this past February, we have finally absorbed completely, which has added to our network in Spain 7 new locations, including Menorca, which is getting lately more famous and busy than Ibiza and Mallorca. We're in the process of rebranding, so hopefully for summer, all these locations will be 100% Universal Aviation.
Excellent. Looking forward to hearing more about that. And I know we're going to be talking about that a lot with our customers at eBase coming up very soon at the end of the month. And you'll be there as well. So as we continue with your update, can you highlight any big events? We always like to touch on those that everyone should be aware of, especially since it'll impact traffic.
Well, we are super busy right now. Actually, we have many festivities, especially in the south of Spain, like the Feria de Abril, Motorbike Jerez World Championship, also Jerez Horse Week, and all at the same time. We basically ran out of parking in all those locations on the south, including Granada or Almería. So summer started early this year. Also on June 4th, Formula One race in Barcelona. No more events despite the summer season in the southeast coast and Balearic Islands, where we can expect congestion issues starting in June until the end of September.
Wow, so you did start early, right? No doubt it's going to continue. All right, any other high volume locations and special parking considerations?
Well, high volume locations, obviously, as always, are Ibiza, Palma, Mallorca, and Menorca. To drop or pick up passengers, as normally they publish a note that restricts overnight. Actually, normally only allow a maximum of 17 minutes on the ground. Then big volumes on airports, these operators choose to reposition their aircraft, such as Valencia, Alicante, Madrid, or even Barcelona. Remember, for the Balearic Islands, slots cannot be requested earlier than 15 days prior your estimated day of arrival.
All right, also good advice. And speaking of advice, what would you wrap up with? Your final words of wisdom for our operators coming to Spain?
As I always say, please try to send your handling request as soon as possible. Even though in the Balearic Islands airports, parking and slots cannot be requested until 15 days prior to the arrival schedule, it is good to have this request as soon as possible. So at least the airport authorities are aware of your desired dates. And for the rest of the Spanish airports, as soon as we receive the request, we can coordinate and confirm the slots on parking. So the earlier, the better. Also, secondly, but also very important, try not to change the initial schedule too much. I know it's not easy, but the less changes we make, the more chances we have to get the parking and slots desired.
All right. Excellent advice from all of our Mediterranean experts. Thank you so much, Gonzalo, and he'll be here for questions as well. So from here, speaking of questions, some of you very much a big thank you, sent in some questions in advance. So we're going to get to those first, but if you have any other questions for this team, please, you can drop those into the chat if you haven't already, and we will try to get to those before we run out of time today. So let's start with what was already sent in. First one is a question on dropping passengers. Oh, Keely, this one's going to be for you and Saint-Tropez. Suggested long-term parking airports and something perhaps closer than Paris is the request. So let me bring Keely back on with us.
Good question. Closer than Paris, I would recommend Genoa again. It's going to be probably the easiest in and out for parking and repo. And for Saint-Tropez, I would keep in mind you do need to pass a test by a local instructor. I believe there's a test flight associated with that. So happy to get the person who posed the question more information if they need.
Yes, and that is a good point. I know, thank you again for everyone who did put some questions in advance. Often they're pretty general, but don't forget, you can always reach out to us here for the webinar at our operational insight at univway.com email. We'll post that at the end, but definitely reach back out to your account manager or your mission advisor or your trusted Universal Aviation or air to ground representative for more specifics at any time. Thank you, Keely. All right, so from here, I think we're going to Adriel. We have a question about India. So let's get to that. All right, let's see. The question was, or the comment in question, we've recently been to India, and while COVID testing, proof of vaccination was not required, the handlers upon arrival have been asking our passengers for their vaccination information. Why is this? Can you shed some more light on that?
Yeah, so essentially what happened is we had a flight operating to India, and airport health officer requested a vaccine certificate from a passenger showing full vaccination. And the passenger didn't have it, but luckily we're able to get it from the PA and pass it on to the health officer. But it resulted in a pretty lengthy delay in clearing immigration and customs for that passenger. So to mitigate these, ahead of time, we've just made it a standard so no one runs into any issues to get that information ahead of time before the trip, send it over to the handler, and then recommend that you have that vaccination certificate or whatever with you as well, just to make sure that you don't run into any delays on arrival.
All right, and I think it may be safe to say, based on what we heard about Asia Pacific in particular, since and across, let's put it this way, any international travel, probably a great idea to still have any vaccination information available if need be, but especially any destinations in Asia Pacific. Obviously, some still have very specific requirements, as you went over, Adriel, for China in particular, but back to sometimes what happens on the ground can be different than what is in that can be interpreted differently than what is in the regulations or the information that's been shared with the crew and with us. So being prepared, as always, sounds like the plan. Okay, thank you for that insight, Adriel. Let's go to, we have a Europe, well, this is actually broad-based, Europe or Asia Pacific, so a big visa question. Christine, that sounds up your alley. So we're going to put you on the spot for that. So the question was, any new visa requirements for Europe or Asia? And I know that's a little general because we don't know if we're talking crew, passenger, but I'm sure you have some thoughts here to share.
Yes. So if we're talking about U.S. citizens, crew or passengers, right now, as far as Europe is concerned, I know Juan already talked about it. EU Lisa has been delayed, so that's not something they're going to have to deal with until 2024 or until they delay it again. The UK right now, the visa requirements are only for specific nationals. I think they're starting with Qatari, so that's not something that's going to affect US persons for the time being. The one thing I wanted to point out here, visa requirements. In most cases, with few exceptions, need to be arranged prior to arrival. What we're seeing is because there's an increased amount of traffic, the lead time to get some of these visas can be quite lengthy. China, I know at some point was requiring over 40 days because when it opened up, everybody was trying to get in there. I know the persons that had the crew visas valid or invalidated and are still valid are back on the docket, but they still require a good 2-3 weeks. And also consider that if you need an updated passport, as far as US persons, the lead time right now, I think we're hearing it's up to 11 weeks. Even if you're trying to get it at a shorter time frame, you may want to seek out some assistance with that, because even that's taking longer times, because you may need that for a backup if you need visas. So you can use one and then have another passport for visa purposes.
Good. Thank you, Christine. As always, super thorough. See, don't we need her? We need her on the webinar every time, right? Your fans are demanding it. In fact, I'm demanding it. So in that case. All right, from here, I'm going to hand it off to Adriel again. We have a question about form filing. What forms have to be filed by the crew and passengers before arriving in Beijing, and how long in advance?
So I know that there was the health form that had to be done, and the window was 24 hours in advance, but they recommended not doing it right at the window because that form is filled out as far as clearing customs and immigration. So if you land on the ground, it takes you an hour to get through there as crew, shutting down the aircraft. If you did it right at 24 hours, you'd be past that time limit. So I'd say somewhere between, give yourself a little bit of cushion before arrival for doing that health form before you get there. But
makes sense. All right. Got it. Thank you, Adriel. And I think that wraps up our pre-submitted questions. So here's where I tap Lewis and say, hey, do we have any live questions that we need to address with the team?
We do not.
No way. I don't know what to make out of that. We just covered so much that everyone's in shock. Could that be it? Wow. Okay. Well, I'll give you one more second as I wrap things up, but definitely respecting your time. We are just under an hour, just barely. So first off, a very big thank you to all of our speakers. We had, I think, 7 today, so there was a lot to coordinate. I really appreciate everyone's efforts to do that, to bring the content to all of you. On our side, and I saw that we already had this update drop into the chat, but just as an FYI, speaking of the Mediterranean and Europe, which was a big focus for today, we will have representatives from across Universal, trip support, all of our account management, as well as our ground transport, Universal Aviation members, Air Culinaire, all of our various mission management team members are going to be at eBase in Geneva at the end of May. That's May 23rd through the 25th. Hopefully, if you are in, you can stop by to see them. Unfortunately, I will not be there, but I look forward to hearing how it all goes with everyone. And then finally, just those final reminders. If you have, first of all, feedback on us doing some screen sharing of where this type of information is available in Feasibility IQ, if that was valuable for you, let me know. You can drop us a note at operationalinsight@univway.com. Also, and that's where these ideas come from, is people emailing me and saying, hey, I'd like to see more of this. I'd like to see this topic. Please use that same email. Would love to see your opinion and gives us ideas on what else we could cover. In the end as well, we are continuing to build our schedule for upcoming webinars. Like I'd mentioned, we'll probably do a deeper dive into Feasibility IQ again soon. But in addition, we'll be tackling everything that comes up seasonally as we head into the late summer and into the fall. So definitely keep us in mind if you've got a topic or a speaker you'd love us to feature. And it's been a pleasure having you back. I love seeing everyone. Thank you for all the cameras on, and it's been great to see you all. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. And remember, this video will be available in tomorrow's Ops Update email. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.